While there are still 8 teams fighting for the chance to be this year's NBA champion for the Raptors, they are officially in off-season mode, which means looking ahead to the future, constructing the roster, trying to see what pieces around the league or potentially entering the league could be a good addition to your team. Essentially, all eyes are on the future here. And I mean, frankly, for the Raptors, I feel like all eyes have been on the future for a while, but especially now is the time. So with that in mind, we are going to talk about some of the biggest needs heading into next season. Now, before I fully hop into the video, just as usual, make sure you're leaving a like on it. It takes like a second. It makes a huge difference for the way the video performs. So thank you if you're doing that. And if you're new here, just make sure to subscribe to the channel. Again, I won't give you the usual shtick about, trying to hit 1K. Everybody knows I'm trying to hit 1K, so just help me hit 1K. And yeah, with all that being said, let's hop into today's video. So I'm going to start things off with one that should feel a little obvious, but I'm still going to say it anyways, and that is shooting. The Raptors need to add shooting to their current roster. I mean, think of the main rotation. Who do you have there that's excels in the shooting department? Gary Trent Jr., I guess, although he can be hot and cold. Obviously, we see that a lot from Gary. You obviously have Fred VanVleet, and I mean, past that, like, OG's all right, Pascal's all right, but these are guys that are obviously looking to do their damage more so on the inside and then using their shooting as a further extension of their game. Past that, it's not their main thing. I'm talking guys that are like high 30s, three-point shooters, are going to stretch the court for you and are going to let guys like obviously Scotty Barnes, Pascal Siakam, whoever it is, do their damage on the inside because they're going to draw their defenders all the way out to the perimeter and make those driving lanes a whole lot more open. Now, shooting, I'd say, is a pretty, I don't want to say easy one, but it's something that you could definitely find in this league at this point. Obviously, sharpshooters are not a commodity that is scarce. And frankly, you can take a couple of different approaches, as to how you want to find this. You can look in free agency, you can look at trades, you can even potentially look at the draft to see if there's a shooter kind of in that early second round where you have the Pistons pick to select. There's a lot of options here essentially, and shooting, again, will go such a long way, I think, for just cohesiveness in terms of how minutes look when guys are on the court and just spreading out defenders of the opposing team, getting them out of the paint, and giving guys like Pascal and Scotty Barnes, who would thrive with extra room, for their drives, giving them the chance to have that opportunity to thrive would be huge. Shooting, I think, is, for my money's worth, again, probably the most obvious one, but still one that needs to be talked about. This team needs the help there. I mean, you saw it in Game 6, a Game 6 that I was lucky enough to attend, and, then not so lucky once they were getting knocked out. But you saw it when Doc Rivers made the defensive adjustments, when he shifted into more of a zone, and when he tried to get the Raptors to beat the Sixers shooting the ball. They couldn't do it, and obviously they were missing Fred VanVleet, but even with Fred VanVleet, that is a tall order to ask given the current roster construction. So shooting, I think, has to be pretty much near the top of the list for things that the Raptors need heading into next season. Now, another major need here is obviously just somebody off the bench that can really just initiate that offense, and just really another extra depth piece here. I think this one is fairly obvious. I mean, we saw a lot of moments this season where the Raptors starters were handling a massive load in terms of their minutes and just borderline, like Nick Nurse was borderline kind of walking that fine line of potentially running his guys into the ground from all those minutes. And again, in those situations, you risk injury because of how heavy you're playing your starters, so on and so forth, and you just don't want to wear these guys out before, you kind of have to in the playoffs type of thing. So getting another guy that can really create offense both for himself and his teammates off the bench. He doesn't even have to be your go-to six-man or anything. I think you're comfortable with the fact that Precious Achiuwa can probably play that role, but just a guy off the bench that's just gonna make everybody else better around him, gonna give guys like Fred or whoever else the case is. Again, it's just easiest to envision that being a guard, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a guard. Just somebody that can really provide a plus for your team off the bench and just get things going while guys like Pascal, while guys like Freddie, while guys like Scotty are sitting on the bench. That extra playmaking, that extra scoring will go a long way, and there's a lot of ways to acquire that kind of player, whether, frankly, whether you think you can develop it internally. Obviously, I would like to believe that the Raptors still think a lot of Delane O'Banton. If you feel like he can be that guy after the offseason work, really give him a chance to be thrust into that role and get better. Or again, like, these are guys that are easy finds. I don't want to say easy finds if you get the right fit, across the league, through trade, through free agency, and once again, you can explore it through the draft as well. The options are plenty for filling that role, and I would really enjoy seeing the Raptors take that option, so you don't see guys like Fred VanVleet just struggling with injuries by year's end because of the heavy toll that the minutes have taken on his body. Now, the last one here is kind of a little more nitpicky, but I still feel should be thrown into the conversation. This one's a little more situational, but matchup-wise, depending on the team, again, going to the bench, I'd like to see the Raptors acquire a bigger center type of player, just for specific matchups, just so you don't get caught in situations where you're really getting beat by those, DeAndre Ayton's, Joel Embiid's, Nikola Jokic's, guys like that. I mean, obviously, I've said it before and I'll say it again, there are ways to scheme around that, yes, but an easier way to kind of have that matchup is have, a big, close to 7 feet, defensive-minded center that can also rim run and do whatever else. That is an add off the bench that, again, for certain matchups, it doesn't have to be a guy that you throw like 20 million at or whatever the case is, just a good bench piece, defensive-minded center that can come in and play certain matchups well and just give the Raptors a better chance to win that game than they otherwise would have without that person on the roster. I think that little add, that little tweak could go a long way as well for just both the regular season and playoffs, when obviously you're playing these close matchups with teams that you're going to see a lot, and you can get more specific in terms of giving this guy extra minutes because in this scenario, he would definitely help. That more or less does it for me. What do you folks think? Am I missing a major kind of piece of the equation here when it comes to team needs? If I am, let me know below. There's a comment section for it, right? For the most part, I actually look at these needs as fairly, I don't want to say minor, but I like personally where the core is at with this team. I think they have a bright future ahead of them. They showed a lot of very promising signs, and yeah, I don't think there needs to be major changes. I feel very comfortable thinking that the Raptors can roll into next season with more or less the same starting lineup that they had this year and just a few tweaks to bench players, frankly, and they can make a good jump from, I'd say, maybe the 5th seed to quite near the top of the Eastern Conference. I mean, hell, they weren't really that far off this year. So yeah, when it came to these needs, they felt minor. I think for the most part, the Raptors' major, focuses are handled. I know I made that sound weird, but I mean, they have a guy like Scotty, which is a player that has a chance to be great in this league and has a chance to be the cornerstone for your team, and you have a lot of very good pieces there otherwise, like a Pascal Siakam, like a Fred VanVleet, like an OG Anunoby, Gary Trent Jr., Precious Achiuwa, so on and so forth. You get the idea, right? They are a good team, and there's not a whole big difference between where they're at now and some of the better teams in the East, or the best teams, rather, in the East. So I just like to see them make a few minor tweaks that'll help push them along, get them closer there, and then obviously, hopefully, that coupled with the added development of some of the other guys on the team, and all of a sudden, the Raptors are looking scary next year. Yeah, those have been more or less my thoughts on the day. The usual drill, folks. Like the video, like I said at the beginning, doesn't take a lot of time, but it makes a huge difference. And if you're new here and you enjoyed what you watched today, subscribe to the channel. I promise the off season is here, and the off season is a great time for content, and I will be dropping it Yeah, it's been JJ Buckets. It's been a pleasure, and I will see everybody next time.